moment in time, this is my answer. But check back in 15 minutes and it might be different because things seem to be changing that quickly. So in your own lives, just doing a little introspection here, think about your life in September of 2021, 2 years ago. What was your life like 2 years ago? How many of you have experienced some significant changes in 2 years? I'm not asking you what, just, if you raise your hand, yeah. Yeah, you are in 2 years, 2 very short years. Think of all the changes that have happened in your life. And that's just on an individual basis. Some things are the same, and that's good. Some things are different, and that's also good, whether we think about it at this point as good or not. So I think we can agree that the one thing constant in life is change. It happens, and it continues to happen. And that's one principle. So I'd like for us to think about some of the other principles of change and how we can use them. And for those of you who are chronologically gifted enough to remember the Twilight Zone and Rod Serling, he would always start the program, "For your consideration." So I will start in Rod Serling's tone. "For your consideration this morning, in a building in Yakima, Washington, let's talk about change." So I'd like for us to also do a little experiment. Now, this is individual, no pressure. But in a few moments, I'm going to ask you to take a very deep breath and then close your eyes, if you're comfortable with that. And then I'm going to make a statement. I'm going to say something. And I want you to think about me saying it directly to you. So put your first name in there, and then I'll say the statement. Okay, are we ready? Okay. Big deep breath in. Big deep breath out. And now imagine your name, and I am telling you, your life is about to change. Now, what's your first emotional reaction? What's your first thought about that? And just sit with that for a moment. Okay? Okay. I'm not going to ask you to tell me, but just notice, what were your very first thoughts and feelings when I told you that your life was about to change? Some people, including me when I did it, my first thought was, oh no, not anymore, not again, thank you. Some people have a very different response. It's like, whew, yes, it was like a thank you, Jesus moment that, finally it's going to change. And some people would have a kind of indifferent, well, yeah, so what? But one thing that is certain about change, it will always trigger certain emotions and thoughts in you, because change always leads us into the unknown. And even if it's just for a moment of unknown, it always leads us there. And it's a good kind of check on how comfortable are we being in the unknown. And do we want to stay there very long, or do we quickly want to get out of there as fast as we can? So any change, major, minor, we're in a period of not knowing. Now, another thought for your consideration. In general, people do not expect a lot of changes in their lives. Now, we can plan for change, we can work toward it, we can make it happen, we can say, yes, this is what I want, I'm going for it, and life is good. But we usually don't wake up every morning expecting our lives to change. Mostly. I mean, I don't. I do not wake up in the morning and say, oh, goody, the sun's up. How is my life going to change today? That's not on my radar at all. We don't expect it to do that. And in fact, I can get quite miffed when I have my day planned and a change comes along and I have to adjust to that change. I can get downright grinchy about it, depending on what it is. However, if we changed our perspective to one of expecting change to happen in our lives, how would that make it different for us? What would we do differently? And this is important because it's a shift in consciousness. It's one thing to say, my life is going very well, and this is the way it's going to go. The end. And it's another thing to say, yes, my life is going very well, and I expect it to change. Normally, we don't do it, I don't do it. I work very, very hard at getting my life in order. I work very hard at getting my life the way I want it. And sometimes I thoroughly intend to keep it that way. But what if we thought, yes, this is my life at this moment, and it's going to change. Now, if your life is not going the way you want it, to me, this would be very encouraging. Yeah, I'm in a really, really bad place. This is not where I want to be. And it's going to change. That's a whole different mindset with what's going on in the presence. And it's still a change. It also gives us a different perspective between expectancy and expectations. When I said your life is about to change, probably, if you're like me, your mind started thinking about, oh no, in the past, I've had changes. And then there's a judgment about what those changes were. Because expectations carry with it judgment, and it also carries with it assumptions about how that change is going to affect you, right? Yeah. Because we all have stored in our wonderful, wonderful data banks all of our past experiences. This change happened. This is what happened. This is how I felt about it. And then we tag on a judgment about it. It was good, bad, indifferent. And some changes have been what I would like to call learning experiences. So I can say, well, that didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to work, and I'm not going to do that one again. And that's one aspect of it, instead of saying, that was horrible. But many times, our wonderful brain is a great computer. And we expect that if this type of change happens, then we're going to have the same type of reactions and outcomes. And how many times have either you or you've heard someone say, well, I'm not going to do that because I know what's going to happen if I do that. Okay, but do you really know for certain that that is going to happen, that exact outcome is going to happen? But if we have expectancy, yeah, life's going to change, and draw the line. Not having the judgment, not having the assumptions about how the outcome is going to be, we detach ourselves from the outcome, and gives us a lot more freedom then to do something either differently or maybe go in another direction. So the question, again, for your consideration, is it possible that the reality I'm experiencing isn't the real truth about the change? Is it my perceived truth about what's happening? What is my data bank of past experiences influencing me about this, and maybe clouding my judgment about the change? Is it really the truth about the change that I'm seeing? And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So, also for your consideration this morning, change is the norm for nature and the universe. Would we agree with that? Nature certainly is changing. It has seasons. Nature changes. The universe changes. New stars are discovered. Black holes appear. Stars explode. Planets explode. It's always changing. The universe we have now is not the same universe we had 10,000 years ago. And considering the past 3 or 4 months with nature, I've kind of given up watching news, political news and world news, but I always thought like the Weather Channel was way cool. And now I'm kind of afraid to even watch the Weather Channel because it's, I'm getting some of these holy sheetrock moments when I turn on the weather, because think of it, in the last, say, 4 months, just 4 months, we've had devastating floods all over the world. We've had devastating fires, I think in every continent except Antarctica, because there's not a whole lot to burn down there. But every other continent has experienced floods and fires. We've had earthquakes, the devastating earthquake in Turkey. I saw some of the clips of that where the ground just opened up and suddenly there's a trench there. Volcanoes. It seemed like every continent that has a volcano has had eruptions of volcanoes. Now we have hurricanes. So, I'm kind of thinking I'm not going to be watching much of any news anymore because the earth is changing so much. Now, and never mind why, but the earth is changing. Mother Nature is changing. And I thought that that in itself is incredible. The amount of change that nature is going through. And then the thousands of people whose lives have absolutely changed in a moment. They've lost their homes, they've lost loved ones. It's incredible to think about the change that all of those people are going through at this point. And, I've always thought, well, it's great for nature to change, move, adapt. That's what nature does. And it's always changing, moving, adapting. I say, yay, Mother Nature, you go, girl, and that's good for you. But I'm not a tree, so I don't have to follow that pattern, thank you. And I'm finding that really is not the case. Because again, for your consideration, what if we believe that everything is part of the divine energy, if we all are part of the God particle, then the dynamic nature of that energy is always moving, changing, and adapting, which, in a sense, that makes our lives like the trees. And so I had the insight, well, I guess I am a tree in this respect. Because if we changed our idea about change itself, if we expected it to change like nature, if we expect to adapt and to move, then we could be more welcome to the unexpected and the unknown. Now, I'm sure generally trees, grass, plants, etc., do not make out a life plan of how they're going to be the best possible tree, the best possible plant, etc. They just do it. There was a great quote in a book by Neil Donald Walsh, and the book is, "When Everything Changes, Change Everything." And I thought, okay, that's a good title. But he said, what if change is not a disruption of life, but an eruption of life? Life saying it's time to do something different. What if we see that change is not a break in the flow, but it is the flow? What if it's not a change in the direction, but it is the direction? What if we became aware that without change, life itself would not be, because life is movement and life is change? The question is not, therefore, whether life will contain change, but what kind of change will life contain? This helps us, again, shift from expectations about changes to expectancy of change, without the attachments, without the judgments. It just is. And it helps us to understand more what Jesus and other great masters have taught, in their own words, throughout the ages. Judge not by appearances. And this has been a real learning experience for me. I can't say I've mastered it either. But it reminds me, judge not by appearances. It also tends to remind us that change is really an announcement of life's intention to go on. And it is really the impulse of life itself. Now, I have to admit that there are times when I have wished life wouldn't be quite as impulsive as it has seemed to be. But it is the impulse of life. Jesus told people, "Be not afraid, O ye of little faith." And even FDR, in his famous speech, said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." And they were both right on that. Because again, when change comes, it triggers the unknown. How afraid are we of the unknown? Now, there are some changes, yes, we can control, we can modify, we can work around, we can initiate, we can bring into existence, and that's great. There are some changes we cannot control. If the Yakima River starts flooding and starts coming into your home, there's not much you can do but get out of the way. You cannot stand at the Yakima River and say, "No, not again. You change directions and go down the street. Thank you." It doesn't work. However, again, what we can control are our emotions, our thoughts, our truths about what is happening, our idea about changes, and our idea about why it occurs in our life. That we have total control over. And to close with a quote from Bob Dylan, "The times they are a-changin'." Namaste.